Jeff, welcome to Thriving Beyond Diabetes show.
Oh, thank you, Gamzin. Such a joy to be here.
It's great to have you with us today. Your personal story from a major scale accident to founding Avita Yoga is incredible, inspiring. Can you share the turning point in your recovery that led you to create Avita Yoga, and what drives your mission today?
Great question. Yeah, well, at the age of 61 now, yoga has been a part of my life since age 21. It's been 40 years in the yoga world. And I was so inspired by my first practice. The first time I walked out of a class, I was just, uh, I felt these awesome effects in my body. But I turned and asked the teacher, I said, "What is yoga? What does it mean?" He said, "Yoga means to join." And I just thought, okay, why did we spend an hour pulling ourselves apart if yoga means to join? And so immediately I realized that is an important question. I was drawn to this thing called yoga largely for the spiritual practice, but I kept practicing and practicing. I traveled through my 20s and studied with lots of different teachers, and it was in about it was about 9 years later, in Boulder, Colorado, I discovered A Course in Miracles, and that book changed my life. And it was in that book and through that book that the answer, what it means to join, began to come to me, which is just this heartfelt idea of joining with our source, loving and perfectly whole. And so it's kind of like what Socrates asked us to do. He said, know thyself, not our likes and dislikes in form, but our true self, happy and whole. That is the backbone to my journey. And then I would say, I've had a series of injuries, and I often say there may be injuries, but there are no accidents. So my injury, the one that you're speaking about, was a high-speed ski accident injury where I collided with my friend. Our hips smashed, his right hip, my left hip, and really damaged my hip. It tore the labrum and, had an impact inside the hip itself. And when I went to the doctor, he said, well, you're just going to have a hip replacement someday. And I thought, no, at the age of 50, I'm too young to have a hip replacement. I'm not going to do that. And so it was about 6 months. I just kept trying to get rid of the pain. I had the sciatic pain going down my leg and couldn't get rid of the pain. But I found myself in an awkward shape one day in a yoga class and was putting pressure into the painful part of my hip. And for a moment, I thought I should avoid it. And then the intuitive guidance came in and said, no, stay in that shape. And I did. I stayed for 2-3 minutes. And the pain that I was feeling began to turn into what I now call healing sensation. The guidance in that moment just said, bones love pressure. It just felt so right. And I have a long history of anatomy and physiology. My dad was a veterinarian. He quizzed me and taught me so much about the body. And so I put it all together and started mending my hip by putting pressure into the joint. And I've gone back for MRIs and X-rays, and it just gets better and better. The density of the cartilage and the health of the cartilage inside the joint is pretty phenomenal. The doctors kind of scratch their head about it, but none of them ask me what I do. It's kind of crazy. I go in and I've become my own experiment. And so now for the last almost 12 years, I've been teaching this thing called Avita Yoga that teaches everyone now how to put healing compression into your joints. And so that's how it all came to be. And my mission is just to really share this message because it works. And when something works, we just want to share it. It brings more peace. It brings more mobility. It decreases pain and increases the joy in people's lives.
Brilliant. Very interesting story and mission. Thank you for sharing that. So you suffered a lot because of the ski injury and hip damage. Then when you explored yoga and the concept of it to join, then about the pressure for the joint, that was an amazing idea for recovery. And you mentioned that now, because of the results or the outcome from it, you have been teaching or promoting yoga for about 12 years now.
Mm-hmm.
That is a long time to do that. My next point that I want to discuss is about mobility versus stretching. You know, many people, specifically those who use yoga as exercise, think stretching is the key to flexibility and freedom of movement. The question is, how do you define the difference between stretching and mobility, and why is that distinction so important?
Yeah, that's a very good question. I'll first say that you said, wow, 12 years is a long time to be teaching. And I practice on this mat behind me 4 times a week. At the age of 61, you know, I don't know many 61-year-olds that could do a regular kind of everyday practice 4 times a week because it's so demanding. And to continually stretch the muscles actually starts to become a little more harmful than helpful. I've known a lot of yoga teachers, a lot of famous ones, many who've written books, have ended up having knee replacements, hip replacements, and things like that. I know some that have had back surgery. And so these are the kinds of things. I owned a yoga studio for 10 years in Boulder, Colorado, and I would see people come into the room, into different classes. I'd see them put their hands on their body. Sometimes it indicated they were in pain during a pose, and they'd push themselves. It looked, sometimes watching some of these people practice, it looked painful and awkward. And I just knew it wasn't right. I just knew there was a better way. And that desire was answered through that ski injury, you know? So, and one of the things that really came to mind was this difference between stretching, or the difference between flexibility and mobility. Flexibility is something that we're born with, I believe. We come in to the world with a body type that is inherently either very flexible or tight. And of course, there's a continuum. You know, we all come in somewhere on this line. Really athletic people that are not very prone to injury, their bodies do just about everything they ask of it. Those are the sort of the athletic body types that are right in the middle. They're perfectly balanced between mobility or between flexibility and tightness. As we go through life, you know, hormones change and our kind of environment around us changes. Our diets sometimes change, and those things can affect our degree of flexibility. But stretching the muscles is the wrong approach to a more systemic or intrinsic changes that happen to us as we go through life. Mobility targets the joints. I was a Rolfer in the early 90s. I studied Rolfing and integrated Rolfing into my yoga practice. And Rolfers are trained to recognize compensation patterns, recognize limitations in movement. And we were taught the change happens in the connective tissue. That's the shiny white stuff, the fascia that is around the joints. And if you put some pressure on them and ask for movement, it changes. And so that also informed my Avita Yoga practice. It informed the transition. I thought, okay, we need to target the joints. We need to go right for the joint in every shape. You can't have a pose, because if you try to get better at it, if you try to get it just right and make yourself look good in the mirror, it won't work. So most of the work we do is with our eyes closed. A lot of it is on the floor. And we use these shapes to get close to the joint, in and around the joint. And that's where the healing happens. It's remarkable. When you slow down and target that, it fosters a deep sense of peace and lasting change in our joints. And I can go into more about why that is, but let's stop there for a moment.
Brilliant. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. The key point here is mobility targets the joints. Here where the magic happens. This will lead us to the next point, which is about joints and pressure. I think you have mentioned before that it is not about the exercise. Even people who do exercise will have sort of joint, let's say knee pain as an example. So it's about how we use pressure to on the joints. The question here is, can you explain how pressure on the joints helps healing and function?
Yes. Yeah, that's the meat of it right there. And I dedicate a chapter to this in my upcoming book, because it's helpful to have diagrams and kind of helpful to study this. And it took me a long time to be able to put it even in words and then to write about it. But here it is in a nutshell. Okay. All of our major joints are called articulating joints. Your fingers, your elbows, your shoulders, every joint in your spine, between a rib head and a vertebrae, those are all articulating joints. All articulating joints have a synovial membrane. It's a thin membrane that wraps around the joint, and it helps hold the joint together to some degree, but it also contains the synovial fluid inside the joint. Okay, so you've got this little pocket of synovial fluid. I sometimes refer to it as elbow grease, because it has lubricating qualities. It's loaded with the proteins like hyaluronic acid. It's got collagen proteins in there, and it bathes the cartilage in a nutrient-dense fluid. Okay, so we kind of know that much. That much information is pretty common. But what people don't realize is that there's a metabolic process going on in every cell throughout the body. Okay, so a cell in a cartilage cell, a muscle cell, a bone cell, a liver cell, a kidney cell, it doesn't matter. Those cells are doing a job and creating energy. And every time there's energy created or energy used to do their job, there is a waste product, right? And we need waste products to be eliminated or the environment gets toxic. So imagine a power plant. You know, all power plants in the world produce energy, but they have toxic byproducts. We got to deal with those somehow. The blood system, the lymphatic system, there's all kinds of different systems in the body to help cleanse and facilitate that process. But there are no blood vessels inside our joints. How do you think the cartilage and the inner environment of our joints is cleansed? Okay, we've mentioned the word many times now. It's pressure, it's compression. So, Gamden, if you made a strong fist, if you just squeeze your fingers and make a strong fist, and if you look at your fingers, you can see they're kind of white knuckles. And if you squeeze, you can feel the muscles doing the work, and then you might be able to feel the compression inside some of the joints. We tend to feel the pressure in the joints that have the most need for it. Okay, so you might get a little arthritic feeling. A lot of people get some arthritis in various points of their fingers, and the base of the thumb is a common place for arthritis. When that arthritic pain comes up, we have been taught to avoid it. Any pain avoided will exacerbate the problem. If you stop and think about it, whether it's a pain, an emotional pain in your heart, if it's a psychological pain, if it's muscular pain, right? We like it when the massage therapist puts pressure in there and it hurts so good, that kind of thing. If we stop and think about it, when we embrace the pain and not be afraid of it and actually start to move into it, good things always happen. And that's where we start to learn the difference between pain and healing sensation. If you go into a joint, like let's say there's arthritis in the base of the thumb, and you could start to put a little pressure on that and feel into that pain. If you really kind of ram on it and push it, that's not helpful. That's outright pain, and it's aggressive. But if you meet it kindly with sustainable, I call it kind, sustainable pressure, good things happen because it evokes that cleansing process. And we need to stay in the shape for 1.5 to 3 minutes. If we just go into it temporarily, it's kind of annoying and it doesn't really do that much. But when we sustain the pressure and then move out of it slowly, we don't shake our hands, we don't try to eliminate the sensation. We wait, we pause, we rest, and it's in those moments we drop into this deep state of peace. We can hang out there for a little while and then move on to the next shape. And that's how I've cleansed arthritis in my knee. I used to play a lot of racket sports in my youth, and I had shoulder issues. I've cleaned that up. I've developed full range of motion in my joints that I didn't have in my 20s and 30s. And in many ways, I feel younger than I do probably in my 30s because of that. So it works, but we're not burning calories. We're not really exercising. I find that people need to be generally in their, over 40 or over 50 to really appreciate slowing down, doing less to gain more, because we're so conditioned to be aggressive on our bodies and target the muscles and work out. Avita Yoga is a work in, and that makes all the difference.
Brilliant. Very interesting. A lot of information to digest for this point. The main thing here, what you are focusing is about the pressure. So what you are saying, it's helpful. It is like when we go to the gym and we lift weight. So there is a pressure, but that pressure helps our body. Is it a similar concept?
Yeah, it's a little bit similar in that, yes. Well, we know bones. See, bones like the pressure too. And so people kind of do these high impact things to bring bone density. The Avita practice is remarkably helpful for the bones too, because we're putting pressure on them in many different ways. But the pressure and stimulation that you get from going to the gym and moving weights around can be helpful, but there's two primary problems with it in terms of, at least in terms of really going for optimal joint health. The first one is we often go to the gym and we work out in the compensation pattern that might be working against us. For example, if you did arm shoulder presses and you're pushing the weight overhead, okay, what if you can only, you don't realize it, but that's your full range of motion. If you watch, you'll see people in the gym they go about that far and then they come down. Some of them have even been taught to protect their joints. And if you're pushing a whole bunch of weight, yeah, you got to be kind of protective of the joints. But if you don't have any weight in your hand and you do that movement, and then you bump in, instead of having resistance in your hand, we work with the resistance in your shoulder. And now you start to feel the restrictions in and around the shoulder, and you keep coming back to it consistently, then it starts to change. Now, I'm demonstrating moving my hand straight up toward the ceiling in an upright position, but we don't do that in Avita. We take gravity out of the equation, because if you're fighting gravity, it's still oftentimes too much to bump into the inner resistance and keep it for 2 or 3 minutes. And if you want, I can show you some of the shapes that we do for the shoulders or any really any joint, but it's very, very, very different.
If you can give us just one example, then we can move to the next point.
Okay. So let's just stay with the shoulder, for example. So I'll talk through it a lot the way I talk through a class. I'm just going to lie on my back. You can see the whole mat, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to lie on my back. My knees are bent. My feet are on the floor. And we're going to find the restriction in the shoulders. Okay. So we're going to start with the arms straight up toward the ceiling. So I'm lying on my back. My head's on the floor. Knees bent, feet on the floor. My fingers pointing straight up toward the ceiling, kind of like Frankenstein. Now I'm going to spread the fingers wide. Even though I'm opening my hands and fingers wide, I'm not making a fist, there's still compression.
Yeah.
If you're just sitting there watching, just open your hand and stretch the palm. You'll feel the pressure. So I'm maintaining that. I'm broadening the shoulders, reaching toward the ceiling. And then I make a slow, big arc overhead toward the floor. I keep the elbows straight. I try to maintain them shoulder width apart. And I'm going to slow down to like a glacial pace. I might even feel like I stop when I bump into a restriction. So sometimes, somewhere along the way, if you haven't had this practice before, almost everybody will get into a restriction. And that's where the magic happens. Even if you never increased range of motion and you kept coming back to the shape and bumped into that restriction, it will have the cleansing impact on the joint, and you'll at least maintain that much range of motion. Okay? Because the shoulder is a circumnavigational joint like the hip, and so we need to come at it in lots of different ways. So we'd stay here in the shape. One arm could be a little lower than the other. My eyes are closed. I'm resonating with the feedback. I'm not afraid of the sensation because I'm adjusting myself. And now, because gravity is actually helping me, I can easily spend 2, 3, 4 minutes here and give the joint the time that it needs. And then we would raise back up and rest the arms and pause for a moment, just observe the sensation, and then move into another shape. There's many, many variations
This is very
on just that
interesting.
one
Yeah.
movement.
How many
But you
times
can see
how many times do you do it?
do what I just did
Yeah.
once. We don't do repetitions.
Oh.
You do it one time, and then we might have a variation on it.
Okay.
Like I might hold a strap between my hands and tear on the strap, tug it apart, and that puts a whole different kind of pressure down into the shoulders. And then lower slowly. I might use one of those blocks and squeeze it as I lower head. Got to keep changing it up. And part of the beauty of this practice is, as a practicing student, when I'm guiding the students through it, you will never know what shape is coming next. There's so many variations and so many different approaches to the same problem. Not knowing what's coming next really helps induce a peaceful state of mind. It reduces anxiety. And it puts us in the present moment. Because I don't know about you, but when you go to the gym and you do a workout, or lots of the yoga that's out there today, it becomes very predictable. You almost know what's coming next, and it actually starts to get kind of boring. This never gets boring to me. I enjoy every class that I teach and practice.
Brilliant. Very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. We hear a lot about heart health or brain health when it comes to aging, but joint health doesn't get the same attention. Why do you believe joint health is critical for long and how well we live, specifically for those with type 2 diabetes?
Yeah, well, I like to think of Avita as addressing our structure. It's like when you walk into a house, you're looking at buying a house, you know the house needs some work. The first thing you want to know is, well, does this house have good bones? Have you ever heard that? That's a phrase in the US. Does it have good bones? And we're always referring to the foundation and the studs and the framework inside the house. What we see is on the outside. And so a lot of fitness paradigms go for a certain look. The assumption is if you make your muscles look good and if you look healthy, then you must be healthy. But that rarely is that the case. So in Avita, we start with the bones. We start with the joints. We start with the structure. And then what I found is when you take care of that, the muscles just take care of themselves. You're not going to end up on the cover of Muscle magazine, but your muscles will be supple, they'll be healthy, and they'll be plenty strong. And so I take this deep inside-out approach. And because of that approach, I think we have the best opportunity for a happy, healthy life and longevity. I'm not a proponent of trying to make my life last longer as much as I am just having a good quality of life. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yeah.
And that we can I can talk specifically to diabetes if you want.
Yeah, but it shows the key point here is when you mention that you start with joints, bones, and structure. That is key point here. So we cannot
Mm.
neglect that. Yeah, heart health is essential, but we need to look to the other side as well. Uh,
Mm.
and
Heart health.
you were
Yeah.
talking, I mean, before you mentioned something about longevity and independence as a result of mobility. If you can touch a little bit of that, then we can move to the next point.
Hmm. Yeah. Independence and mobility for life, to me, go hand in hand. At some point, usually somewhere in our 50s or 60s, we start to ask this question: do I want to be fit or do I want to be healthy? Do I want to be fit or do I want to be able to get dressed all by myself when I'm 90 years old? Do I want to be able to go shopping on my own and live independently? So, so we start to look way down the line. And for some of us, I've had students in my classes in their 70s and 80s who come back to class and they get results. So, you know, and they're definitely asking that question. And in our youth, we never think we're going to get old, but we do come to that point where I want to make sure that what I'm doing today is going to make me happy and healthy tomorrow. And and I think a lot of the fitness trends that are out there, they're so intense, and they're getting more creatively intense. And intensity is not necessary for good health. And then you talked a little bit about heart health. You know, I find that anxiety and tension and a competitive mindset is kind of hard on the heart. And this practice unwinds all that stuff. We don't perform. We don't. I encourage people to let go of any idea of competition. Nobody competes with the people beside them because our eyes are closed, but we start to compete with ourselves and we push sometimes. And so a lot of times I'll be encouraging people to do less to gain more. We do a lot of work with legs up on the wall, and that puts a gentle challenge into the heart to move the blood up into the toes and things. And so there are ways to care for your heart and not push yourself. And that's pretty cool. You know, and then you end up doing the activities that you just fully enjoy. If you don't enjoy something, I question whether or not it's really going to be healthy and good for you. But whatever you really, really enjoy, we can almost always rest assured it's going to be safe and good for us.
Brilliant. Very interesting. So the key concept here is fit to do the work, to do the activities, to take care of yourself. Thank you for sharing that. Very interesting. Now, let's look into your book, Mobility for
Okay.
Life, which feels like a guidebook for aging well. What are the top three takeaways from the book that you think everyone should know and apply?
Hmm. Well, number one is give your joints the pressure they love. And if you just play a little bit with that one idea and start very slow, and and then you'll start to experience point number 2. Discern the difference between pain and healing sensation. If it's painful, reduce pressure, but stay. Close your eyes. Drop into it. And number 3 is let that healing sensation lead you to your deepest sense of peaceful self. And that's it. Give your joints the pressure they love. Learn the difference between pain and healing sensation, and let the healing sensation guide you to a very peaceful presence.
Brilliant.
And that's it.
Very interesting. Thank you for sharing the 3 takeaways from your book. Is it available on your website or Amazon?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. It's on all the major booksellers right now online. It goes into print August 5th. So what you can do right now is pre-order the book at mobilityforlifebook.com. And with the pre-order, as an incentive to pay the $31 that includes the book and shipping and all that, as an incentive to buy it before it actually comes to print, I have some really cool bonuses. First of all, you get the whole manuscript, so you can begin reading it right away. But you also get a free 75-minute class that is really kind of targeted to a new student. And you don't have to do all 75 minutes at once, but you might find yourself doing it because it's so soothing and so helpful. But you could do it in 20, 25-minute chunks if you want as well. And then I was interviewed, and in this interview I answer the question, what is my constitution? Knowing your constitution can be very, very helpful. And so I won't go into detail too much more about that, but those are the bonuses that come with just ordering one book, and those are all available and right up to August 5th. But that's how you get the book, mobilityforlifebook.com.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing that as well. Before we wrap up this episode, do you have a final message you would like to share with our audience?
Well, there is one thing I'd like to say about this practice specifically for someone with type 2 diabetes. Because I thought a lot about that before our show. And what occurred to me is the same thing that helps someone without type 2 diabetes, everything that we've talked about here today, is the same thing that will help somebody with type 2 diabetes. You get all the benefits of cleansing the joint. Sugar, a buildup of sugar or undigested sugar, those kinds of things that you don't even have to have type 2 diabetes to have. You can just have sugars floating around your body that are not fully digested. Those sugars erode collagen. They start to interfere with the collagen matrix, and then you don't get good, strong collagen. So we want to cleanse the sugar molecules out of the joint. And that's something that we can all benefit from. But the second thing we can all benefit from is more peace, more calm, less anxiety, less worry, less concern. And this practice does a remarkable job of doing both of those things.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing your great final message. Where can people reach you or learn more about your work?
Well, I taught for 10 years in person, and then soon after COVID, I took everything online. And now I teach online at Avita Yoga Online.com. And there's lots of ways to get a hold of me there. There's a contact page, and I welcome questions and emails and anything like that. I love to connect with people, and lots of ways to get introduced to the practice as well. So Avita Yoga Online and mobilityforlifebook.com.
Brilliant. Thank you for sharing your contact information. People can find your website in the show notes as well.
Oh,
So
thank you.
for easy access. That brings us to the end of this episode. Thank you, Jeff Bailey, for sharing helpful tips and insights. Thank you, everyone, for watching or listening to this episode. If you need additional guidance, you can book a call at wellnessimpact.org. If you found value in today's discussion, join our thriving community and subscribe or follow us for more insights and strategies. Until next time, take care of your health and keep thriving.